So a bit of a change of plan with this lower triple clamp. I've decided to paint it black. I had started to polish it up, but I've made a decision to replace the old upper triple clamp with a new alloy one that pinches the forks like the lower one, and that allows me, importantly, to raise the fork tubes in the triple clamps, lowering the front of the bike, and I think that's going to be pretty important to get the stance right. These R100s have quite long fork tubes, so they can look a bit awkward as a cafe racer if you don't drop the fork tubes a little bit. It will also be a lot stiffer than this guy, so it should improve the handling somewhat. This one here, the fork tubes just sit here underneath this plate with a nut on the top to hold it, so you can't actually slide the fork tube through. So I've had the two steering bearings and the frame sitting over this radiator for about an hour now, and I've got the two outer races and the steering stem sitting in the freezer. So I'll bring those out now and we'll put them together. Is that done? All done. I've pre-packed these bearings. I just need to add a whole lot more on the outside now and on those races. I made myself one of these special tools, quite easily done. Yeah, now that's too tight. So I'll just back that off a little bit. We'll do the final adjustment when I get the forks in the front wheel on. Ready? Use your knees.
Yeah, you need to lift. I'll lift this up a little bit. There we go. That's it. Now try. Now push it in. There we go. That's it.
Thanks, guys. The rest is easy now. So we have the engine in the frame, all bolted up. I use these half hose, PVC hose pieces here on the frame, tape them in place to protect the frame while we were putting it in. I've got the rear subframe on. I've whipped off the swing arm to make it easier to get that gearbox in. I spent a fair bit of time today just getting that seal out in there. That's where the clutch push rod goes through. The seal was buggered. It was quite difficult getting it out and getting that one in there. I've got the splines on the input shaft of the gearbox greased up, and also on the clutch unit there. You want to smear that every single spline, but not too much. So let's get that gearbox in there. So I'm just doing up these bolts here that connect the shaft to the gearbox. They're 12 pointed bolts, they're one-time use bolts. You've got to torque them to a certain torque, and to do that you need to use a special tool and an adapter for your torque wrench. BMW do sell one. Some tool makers do sell them as well. I went to my local BMW place and they said, oh, we haven't been using those for years. We just tighten them up by hand as hard as you can. Now, I really wanted to do better than that. I think it's pretty important that they're evenly torqued up, and also that they're torqued up to the right spec. You really don't want these coming loose. It could cause a major catastrophe. So I made one. Now I've just made that one up out of two cheap ring spanners that I've welded together. The offset is 44 millimeters. Now all the settings, the torque settings in the manuals are using this tool because this multiplies the torque. You can use a different length offset, but you've got to correct the torque value for that. The 11 millimeter happens to fit perfectly on a 3/8 socket. So, and the other end goes on the bolt, obviously. Let's see if we can tighten one up. This is one. All done. So after another week's progress, we've got the gearbox and engine unit in, shaft in, the rear drive in, all the bolts torqued up to spec. I've got the rear sets on. I was measuring up for brake lines. I've got those on order. I've got the route figured out for the back and for the front here. I think I'm going to go with this manifold. So one line from up here to there, and two lines coming down here. So I've got that guard on there temporarily just to make sure my measurements were right. I've got the main board box mounted, fully mounted, and I'm starting to run the wiring. I've got the bracket for this electronic ignition control unit made up, and that's mounted. I've got headlight mounts put on. They're just there roughly at the moment, still waiting on the headlight to arrive. That's the old top triple clamp there, I'm still waiting on the new one to arrive. Yeah, so plenty of work ahead of me. A lot of electrical stuff coming up next.